Hello, time for another Man in Gray book review. Today's book is Poems of the American South, edited by David Bespiel and published in 2014 by Alfred A. Knopf. It's 254 pages. If you saw you may have seen the famous TV documentary series about the Civil War that Ken Burns did. And one of the parts of that show that really stuck with me was an interview with the Southern novelist and historian Shelby Foote. And in that particular scene, Foote is describing going to see the movie Patton for the first time when it came out in 1970, a movie about General Patton, World War II general. And if you haven't seen the movie or you don't remember it, the opening scene of Patton, you have George C. Scott playing Patton standing in front of a giant American flag, and he's addressing his troops. And he says in his speech, "America loves a winner. America has never lost a war." And Foote says in the documentary, when I heard that, I realized that Patton wasn't from the South, because Southerners know what it's like to lose a war. And that's really the thing that distinguishes the American South from the rest of the United States. Is not only did they lose the Civil War, not only was slavery outlawed, the whole culture of the American South was built on slavery, but the American South was occupied by a military army. The Union Army occupied the South for 10 years after the war ended, that period known as Reconstruction. And even after Reconstruction ended, and we had the Jim Crow era, they didn't go back to slavery, right? There was still, the South had changed. And they held this long-held memory of the humiliation of defeat. Sherman's march to the sea, where the Southern armies retreated and the Northern Army just destroyed everything. And I really believe that that's one of the major reasons why during the civil rights era of the 1960s and early 70s, the Southern politicians eventually relented when the Supreme Court and the federal government insisted on desegregating colleges and schools and everything. They resisted it, but they could have resisted it much more. I think they eventually accepted it because they knew that if they continued to resist desegregation, the president would simply send federal troops to the South and occupy the states again and force them to do what the Supreme Court had ordered them to do. And they didn't want to relive Reconstruction. So the heritage of the Civil War runs deeply through the South, and you see it in these poems, in this really remarkable little anthology. It's a fairly short book, only about 250 pages, but it really covers a broad spectrum of poems about the South. It begins with a collection of African-American spirituals and hymns from slavery days. Of course, these are, of course, folk poetry. And then there are chapters devoted to individual states or pairs of states. There's chapters on North and South Carolina, Tennessee, Louisiana and Texas, Alabama and Mississippi, Georgia and Florida. There's an entire chapter on Virginia. But there's also chapters on the animals of the South and poems about the Civil War. Not all of the poetry, not all the poets in here are Southerners. There's quite a collection of Northerner or even European poets writing about the South, including Paul Laurence Dunbar, Andre Cordescu, Langston Hughes, Herman Melville, Rita Dove, Walt Whitman, and Francis Scott Key. Of course, they've got his famous Star Spangled Banner poem. But there are a lot of poems in here by prominent Southern writers: Robert Penn Warren, James Dickey, Naomi Shabib Nye, Henry Timrod, Edgar Allan Poe, and Nikki Giovanni. I want to read one short poem to you that's from the animal poem section. And this is by, get my glasses here. This is by contemporary poet Henry Taylor, and it's called Riding Lesson. Of course, in Kentucky and Tennessee, there's a big culture of horse racing and riding horses. I learned two things from an early riding teacher. He held a nervous filly in one hand and gestured with the other, saying, "Listen, keep one leg on one side and the other leg on the other side, and your mind in the middle." He turned and mounted. She took 2 steps, then left the ground, I thought, for good. But she came down hard, humped her back, swallowed her neck, and threw her rider as you throw a rock. He rose, brushed his pants, and caught his breath, and said, "See, that's the way to do it. When you see they're going to throw you, get off." And that's a poem called Writing Lesson by Henry Taylor. So, if you are a fan of poems and you enjoy Americana, it's certainly going to be a wonderful book. It's a great collection of fairly short poems, all dealing with the American South, both positive and negative aspects of it from all different viewpoints. The book is Poems of the American South. The editor is David Vespiel. This has been another Man in Great Book Review. Thanks for watching.